do you have to gain your freedom from the Pharaoh in order to become the servant of God? Where's the freedom? And for those of you who have a Bible or Torah at home who want to go refer to the pasuk that we're going to, the Sefat Emet is going to interpret. So this is chapter 12, I believe, verse 22. And this is on Sephariah. In a moment, I'm going to also show us how to, where is it? Okay, let me go to Sephariah here. So the Sefat Emet is available on Sephariah, and I want to do a quick guide through. If you go to Sephariah to the home page, and you scroll and you click on the three bars at the top left and scroll down to texts, you'll see the Tanakh, Mishnah, Talmud, etc., all classical texts. You'll click on more, and then as you scroll down to, let me see where we are, Chassidut. So you're going to see the category of Chassidut. You'll click on that. Then you scroll down Chassidut. You'll see the Sefat Emet is right here. And the Sefat Emet, in the Sefat Emet, we're looking for, you want to click here on this drop-down menu and look for the book of Exodus. And then in the book of Exodus, we go to Parashat Bo. There we go. So it's section 10, Taf Resh Mem Aleph, and then we scroll down. We scroll down a few sections, and we're looking for this section 4, Bamidrash al pi velakachtem agudat ezov. So I hope this was helpful for those of you at home who would like to read along the text of the Sefat Emet.
Just prior to the Exodus, we have the story of the 10th plague, which is the killing of all the firstborn Egyptian males. And as part of the way in which the Jewish people are going to be protected from that plague, the Jewish people were instructed to do something very unusual. They were instructed to take a lamb, slaughter the lamb. Then they were instructed to take a small bunch of hyssop, which is a kind of a shrub, a thin, low-growing kind of a shrub. Dip it into some of the blood from that slaughtered lamb, and take it and paint up a little bit, dip a little bit onto the side posts of their front door, and the doorposts and the top beam. And this was going to prevent when the so-called angel of death was going to wreak destruction on the Egyptian people. They would use the blood on the door as an identifying mark to show that they should pass over those homes and only do their damage to the other homes. Okay, so everyone who has studied the Passover story knows that story. We celebrate it every year, and that comes right just prior to the Exodus, to the freedom of the Jewish people from slavery, from 200 years of slavery. Okay, so the Sefat Emet here, this Hasidic text, is going to take just these few words about this bunch of hyssop, and he's going to show us that hidden in here are very, very profound lessons. So he quotes the pasuk, he quotes the verse, you shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it into the blood.
And he brings a commentary from the Midrash, which is a body, a literature of commentary on the stories of the Torah, and he was going to open that up. So Pirush, she'af al pi shehem shfelim, כמו שנאמר, ואת ערום ועריה.
So the rabbis comment right away. The rabbis, the classical commentators, jumps out at them, and they say, "Why a hyssop? A hyssop is a very lowly type of a shrub. This is supposed to represent the going out to freedom, as the verse is going to later say, with a great with a yad ramah, with great fanfare and strength." And yet, why not take a very like an oak tree or something? I don't know. Why an azov? It's a very lowly thing. Even when things are going our way, and to the extent that God seems to be on our side in a very open and revealed way, and our enemies are being punished in front of our faces, and we're being led out from slavery to freedom, we need to remain humble. We need to stay humble like the lowly hyssop twig. That's the first lesson. Because it's not us. As a matter of fact, in the Haggadah, in the story we tell on Passover, they quote the prophet Ezekiel. That's the second quote here, which says that not only didn't we deserve it, we maybe deserved not to be treated so favorably, because the behavior of the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel in Egypt, was not so great. We had fallen in to a lot of the culture, Egyptian culture, which was not a high-level culture in terms of idol worship and moral behavior and so forth. And being part of this society for a couple of hundred years, the Jewish people basically did not withstand a lot of these temptations and challenges. So the prophet says we were in Egypt, and we were bare of mitzvahs. In other words, our relationship with God wasn't so great. So not only didn't we do anything to deserve this favorable treatment, it's possible we didn't deserve it at all. We deserved the opposite. And yet God took us undeservedly and brought us out from slavery to freedom. So that's why I said take a hyssop, because you have to be humble. That's the first lesson right away. Okay?
Well, Rabbi, I would think that it's not that you quite yet you have to be humble, but you are lowly because you're at a low spiritual state. So it's to remind us that, I think it's the first thing that you said, that they weren't deserving, because they were really, they didn't have much to show for, really. They didn't have a lot of merit. Kol makom, al yedei she'it'asfu liot aguda achat. And then it says, mitoch hashfelut yavo lahem ezo mikodesh.
Right, and through this humility, and coupled with staying together as a community, God reciprocates with help by helping us in a supernatural way, in a supernatural, undeserved way.
So, what's interesting about this is, I think there's a principle here that I just want to take it out of that story of what happened back then, but there's also a principle that applies to our lives, to always, and that is mitoch hashfelut yavo lahem ezo mikodesh. So one really needs to be humble before, grace from the heaven will come. So you want God, you want to have spiritual intervention, you want to have holiness come into your life, you want to have help. You have to make room for that. And how do you make room for that? You need to humble yourself. I think that's what it says. Mitoch hashpelut yavo lahem ezer mikodesh. But not always not only to them, but to us, to anybody, right?
The Sefat Emet is going to enter into a new theme, which is a really important, interesting theme, and I think it's hashgacha pratis. It's providential that we're going to be speaking about this theme today, as will become clear when we
in a moment,
get it.
Right?
You know where I'm going with that.
The politics of today and the politics of then are a little parallel, right?
Yeah.
So it's just the beginning. So כי ביציאת מצרים היה רק התחלה, שיצאו לחירות מתחת יד פרעה, להיות מוכן אחר כך לכנוס בכלל עבדי השם בקבלת התורה.
Right. So here he's talking about the idea of renewal, of rebirth, so to speak. This was a moment, you see, the idea where you're the doorway, where we're on one side of a door, and we're about to walk through that door. We're about to go into an emotional and mental state of slavery, physical slavery, mental slavery, and we're about to walk through a door into a state of freedom. And it's a traumatic thing, actually, because these people had been slaves all their lives. This slavery was for a couple of 100 years. And it's not so easy. The mindset was one of a slave. And now you're walking into a whole different mindset, a whole different world of being. And so this analogy of the door.
But the point I think he's making here is, so you're setting up the kind of the backdrop, the psychological backdrop. Like we think that we may be, moving from slavery to freedom as if that was like a drop of a hat, just like I'm just moving next door, right? But no, he says so. But he says, this is only the beginning. So going out into freedom is not the end, but really the means. It's just the beginning of a bigger process, right? So he says this is in order to be prepared. להיות מוכן אחר כך לכנוס בכלל עבדי השם. This is a preparation for
the receiving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, which would take place 50 days later.
That's right.
So there's a process. We're stepping through this door, but we're not stepping to the finish line, as Rabbi Ruvain said.
Right.
We're stepping into the process, and there's going to be a very difficult process to get us to the goal line.
To receiving Torah.
The receiving of the Torah, the receiving of God's word.
So Rabbi, I just want to point out a very interesting play of words in this sentence, because he says, "Shiatzu lecherut mitachat yad paro." They left. They gained their freedom from the oppression of the Pharaoh in order to become Avdei Hashem, the servants of God. Right? Avdei Eved. They were Eveds. They were Avadim. They were the servants or slaves of the Pharaoh. Now we don't say slaves of God. Doesn't feel, doesn't really describe the relationship with God, but we become servants of God, which is the same word, Eved. Eved Mitzrayim and Eved Hashem. It's the exact same word. But so what's the difference then? Why do you have to gain your freedom from the Pharaoh in order to become the servant of God? Where's the freedom? I first of all, I want to leave it to our listeners, to our students to think about that. What does it mean to be a servant of God? And is that freedom? What's the connection between freedom and being a servant of God, if there is any connection? Actually, I'd love to open it up here to Linda and Stacy if they want to add something. And why do you need that? What is that? How is that connected to receiving the Torah? Because, like you said, 50 days later, we're going to receive the Torah at Mount Sinai. So what's happening here?
That I feel like are for serving God, that could be synonymous or equal to serving others.
Mm. Nice.
Because I feel like God is within all of us. So that's how I interpret it.
Very nice. Thank you, Stacey. Yeah.
I second that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So the idea of God as the parent, and we're all the children, and when a parent sees siblings getting along, helping each other out, it gives them the greatest pleasure. I mean, they feel like they've succeeded.
I believe, and actually the Hasidim believe, that there's God in each one of us. That the Sefat Emet would agree with that. That God is immanent. God is present in each person, in all of reality. That would definitely be a Hasidic theology. But in addition to that, what's interesting to me here is that what the Sefat Emet is saying is that, contrary to popular, understanding, most people think that Passover is about freedom. But he's saying, no, it's not about freedom. Freedom is just the beginning. Freedom is not the end. So, and what does freedom really mean? Right? So, to be relieved from political slavery does not mean that I'm no longer a slave. I can be psychologically inside. I can still be a slave. And I think, Rebbe, you're talking about that. You're in that mentality for 100 years. They open the door, you're out. We know that about prisoners, for instance. Prisoners need to be rehabilitated from prison. So you don't open the door of prison and a person goes back into life and yay, everything is great. It doesn't work that way, because it's got to be something internal that needs to also free, to liberate. And I think that's what this Sefat Emet is saying. It is saying it's not until they get the Torah that they have real freedom 50 days later.
Right, because it provides a concrete guidebook, instruction booklet, for how to access and utilize freedom in a proper, constructive way.
Yeah, and I think there's a wisdom to that, because people say, "Oh, I want my freedom." I mean, it's part of the political discourse in the country right now too. I want my freedom. People were willing to go and be violent for the sake of freedom, right? And I know that if I'm left to my own devices without guardrails, if you give me ultimate freedom, I'm not sure I'm going to be a pleasant person to be around. It's like that kind of sense of ultimate freedom, that there's no rules, no guardrails, no nothing, I don't think is what the Torah is meaning. And I don't think it's what's good for people, individually, good for society. And I think what he's saying, when you become God's servant, when you sort of you replace the master, you replace the Pharaoh as your master, and the Pharaoh can be a symbol to all kinds of things in society that are, materialism or addictions or, whatever is controlling you, and you replace that with God as your master, then you have the freedom of living a spiritual life. But you do. It doesn't mean you don't have a master, right? But when God is the master, I'm a better person. When the Pharaoh is the master, I'm miserable. If that makes sense. I'm just trying to, hear the Sefat Emet's a little deeper psychological message here. Eved Hashem, Eved Hashem, it's instructive that it's the same word. V'zeh haremez b'haza'a ala mashkof u'mezuzot.
Right, and this, everything we've been speaking about, is alluded to in this idea of the side post and the lintel, the the doorway, walking passage way.
That's right.
And as you said, leidaki adayin hu rak haschala, to know, as we've been speaking, that we shouldn't confuse the beginning of a process with the end game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, yay, Passover, we were slaves, now we're free. No, it's Passover, we were slaves, now we can begin the process to understand what the concept of freedom really means.
So this is the concept of the door. We thought the door was only to put the mezuzah, put the blood, so God skips over them, so they're saved. But he says the door means something much more, and that means that this is the beginning. It's the first step. I'm stepping out of the door, but there's a journey yet to travel, right? I think that's what he means. Okay. V'zenit kayem az. I'm skipping just a couple lines. V'zenit kayem az ki b'tziat Mitzrayim haya rak ptichat hapetach. Hashem yitbarach hegen al nekuda mu'etzet zo. There
are two ways that a person can feel a spiritual arousal. So sometimes the arousal can be something outside of ourselves, and we apply it to a miracle God, and we say, wow, now I'm going to become, like, I don't like to say religious, like a spiritual person.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one way. But there's another more profound way where something inside of us churns up. There is an arousal from within.
Yeah.
In other words, I feel like there's something lacking. I feel like I'm not living my full life. Yeah. And there's something nagging. I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to take that step. I am going to make the first step, and hoping that if I take that step and open myself up to something new, that God will reciprocate and pull me the rest of the way in, So he's saying that this whole story of Passover seems to be coming from above to below, actually.
Yeah.
Like we started out by saying we didn't really deserve it, we weren't behaving so well, and yet God came down, he makes all these unbelievable miracles, plagues and frogs and all these crazy stuff, right? And angels of death and the whole work, the whole 9 yards. But at the last minute, something shifts and say, okay, but let's see you make a move. You have to walk through that door into an uncomfortable space. You have to start something new.
Right.
And then I'll help you out. I'll open up the rest of the way for you.
Right. So he says, "V'agam she'yatz'u biyad rama, ratza Hashem yitbarach shiyu bnei Yisrael b'nehem agudat ezov." Interesting, right? So this is it's kind of like what you just said. It was a great deal that they went out into freedom, but what does God want? He wants them
right. He wants effort, humility, and unity. Mm-hmm. Unity of spirit. Right, so that's the conclusion of the piece, and he quotes from the Song of Songs by King Solomon, a beautiful quote.
So the consummation, you would say, or the intercourse, the deepest union.
Right, which will occur 50 days later at Mount Sinai.
That's right.
And Mount Sinai actually is compared to a wedding ceremony by the sages.
That's right. So the freedom here is really the beginning of the journey that leads to that intimacy with God, and this is, I think, in Kabbalah and in Chassidut, this is sort of the ultimate, is the union with God. Freedom is just the first step, and then when we receive the Torah, it's like the ultimate consummation of a marriage, of an intimate relationship between the divine and us.
The more I learn, the hungrier I am to learn more. So this is a lot of information to take in, but I'm.
So that's a good segue, because God willing, continue next Wednesday at around 9 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So we'll continue there. If you haven't subscribed yet to our YouTube channel, Hebrew Learning Circles, so click subscribe, like, comment, and come back next Wednesday. I'll say shalom for now, and Rabbi Eli will take us out with. We'll see you, God willing, next week. Be well, be well. Shalom.
Okay. Take care. Bye, Lyndon, Stacy.